Hello and welcome to the PC Pro podcast. Now, this is very experimental, so please bear with us when everything goes horribly wrong in about 2 minutes. But we're back on the air, if you like, and so we're going to spend 45 minutes talking about the latest technology trends and all the most exciting things happening. So with me, I have Darien Graham-Smith.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
And Barry Collins.
Hello.
And Glorious Technicolor. And I should possibly introduce myself. I'm Tim Danton, so I'm Editor-in-Chief of PC Pro. So we are trying to make this Google Hangouts version of the podcast quite interactive. So if you want to ask questions live, then we'll try and answer them live. If you are listening to this as the audio podcast, then obviously there's no point doing that. But hopefully you'll benefit from a deeply exciting podcast. So let's start off with who have I got first on my list? Darien, you're going to start and tell us about what Intel is doing in mobile.
Yes, I am. It's very interesting, this new system. When you start talking, the video just automatically jumps to your face, which is incredibly distracting. Intel announced just a couple of days ago that it was canning Broxton. Now, you may not know what Broxton is. It's quite forgivable if you don't. But basically, you know that the Atom range of processors, recently we've had Bay Trail was the one that was a really big hit on tablets and so forth, and after that I think we've had Cherry Trail, which you found in some of the more recent Windows tablets and so forth, and Broxton was the platform, the integration of Windows tablets, and I'm not quite sure what the name was actually, but it was also going to be the next generation of smartphone Atoms, the Android on Intel kind of thing. And Intel, much to everybody's surprise actually, let me just dig up the text here, they said they were going to intensify their investments to fuel the virtuous cycle of growth in the data center and in IoT and in memory and in their FPGA businesses. And what that basically means, if you read between the lines, is that they are de-intensifying, they're winding down their investment in mobile. Now, this is quite a big deal, really, because it basically means that Intel's been trying to get onto smartphones and tablets for years and years. You may remember, if you're a very long-term podcast listener, I remember sitting opposite David Fearon when we were discussing the arrival of the first Atom processor and how Intel had an amazing kind of game of catch-up, how it really needed to drive up performance and drive down power consumption to compete in these markets, and it's talked a good fight, and it has actually done a fairly good job of getting to a point where we've had Intel smartphones that have worked, that have been fine. We've had Intel Windows tablets that are perfectly usable, but this is kind of an admission that's not. It hasn't worked as well as they'd like, and plus I think Intel's kind of admitting that, well, tablets in particular are just not where the growth is, and smartphones, maybe it's sort of admitting that it didn't get the foothold it needed, it doesn't have momentum, and maybe it's time to stop throwing good money after bad. And in fact, it's not just about money, it's about kind of the whole investment, because it was also announced, where's the number? I had to write this down because I couldn't really believe it myself. They announced on the 19th of April that Intel were laying off 12,000 people. They were cutting the size of the business by more than 10%, which is not exclusively about Atoms, but you've got to imagine that this hasn't helped.
No, indeed, and actually, if you've got a really long memory, so Barry, I'm sure you possibly recall this, the X-Scale processor.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this, Intel has heritage at this. So I think maybe it's going to be third time lucky in a few years' time. They'll try and create another mobile chip. But actually, I think in a way it's been quite clever. Because what it's saying is that we see the growth, which is in the cloud, if you like. Then they accept that all these devices are going to need lots of computing power, but it's not on device anymore. It's all actually in the cloud, on the servers, using Xeon processors and all these kind of things. That's where they see the growth, and that's where they see their part.
They're probably right, but the timing's not. It's Intel was late to smartphones. I mean, I think we all kind of, it's an open secret that Intel's like big stumble in the 2000s was that it didn't spot how things like the iPhone were going to be enormous, and it carried on. It was investing in desktop chips when those were, when those were kind of sort of losing their relevance. And now it seems to have taken it too long to kind of really realize what's going on. Now things are going the other way. Bill Connolly, writing in Forbes, points out that laying off a small number of people over in a phased way over a period of decline is one thing, but just kind of standing up and saying, actually, we've got 12,000 people too many and they're going tomorrow, that's kind of a big admission of failure. That's an admission that they completely misread the market.
Okay, but we should clarify they're not going tomorrow. This is an announcement of phased redundancies, so they've announced the start of the process, and it could take it'll take months, won't it?
Yeah, but okay, months is pretty quick in the scale of I had a job at this point and I didn't afterwards.
Yes, that's true. And Barry, not Barry, I won't spring this on you, Barry, but Darien, do you want to actually explain what FPGAs are?
I do, very much. FPGAs are field programmable gate arrays, which they're a bit like EEPROMs, if you remember those, which were erasable programmable read-only memory chips. Basically, sorry, I'm resting my elbows on the on the desk here. I should probably stop doing that. FPGAs are basically chips that you buy from Intel or from whoever, and they come they don't have all the instructions and the processes burnt into them in the way. If you buy a Core i7, it's got all the GPU and everything is all there. And they have sort of an easy way of thinking of it is they've got all the logic there, but it's not wired up, and so you, the customer, can actually program the chip to do your particular thing, which is great for, like, say, if you have an embedded task that you need to be done very, very reliably, when it's done very fast in hardware. You buy these FPGAs, you buy these unprogrammed chips from Intel, and then you have your in-house proprietary software, or proprietary firmware, I should say, which you write onto your FPGAs, and then you push them out and they do the job.
Okay, a beautiful explanation. And Barry, you've been very quiet. Come on, do you think Intel is doing the right thing? Is it making a mistake?
I think it's doing the only thing it could do, because it was nowhere in smartphones or tablets, and at some point you've got to just cut off the bleeding wound. And I think it's a very similar situation to where Microsoft finds itself. In fact, the fortunes of the two are probably quite tightly tied together, and it's seen written this week that this is more bad news from Microsoft's perspective. If Microsoft needed any more bad news, it's already got a vanishingly small amount of either the smartphone and the tablet market, and now it's the company that provides the mobile chips to run Windows is saying we're out here. So I think for Microsoft, if Microsoft needed any more encouragement to take Windows Mobile out the back and shoot it, here it is.
Well, I mean, Windows Mobile, it's just, it's barely a thing anymore. I mean, they killed off 90% of the Lumia handsets. They sold off almost all of the Lumia business. There are a couple of handsets which were supposed to be kind of Windows 10 ready, but I think Satya Nadella himself said earlier this year that the Windows Phone market is unsustainable. And now we've got Intel basically chopping off Windows tablets at the knees. I mean, there's no way you can have we've had these kind of £100 tablets that run Windows 10, and they do what they're supposed to do. But you're not going to see any more of those. They're not going to get any faster. They're not going to get any better. The most you can say for them is that there's a generation out there now with Cherry Trailing that won't actually stop working. But I mean, the entire mobile half of the Windows 10 vision is just kaput as far as I can see.
Okay, but wouldn't the Celeron, the mobile versions, the super mobile version of the Celeron, those, I can see those in £100 tablets.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how Celerons are engineered for power consumption. You don't normally see them in tablets. You normally see them in a laptop, which has a much bigger battery than you'd want in a tablet.
But
Intel does
basically just branding, aren't they?
Yeah, well, that's it. Intel does have form of kind of using different cores in the low end Celeron and Pentium. Sometimes they are a cut down version of the Core i3, and other times they're a beefed up version of the Atom. So we could be seeing that. I don't know, to be honest with you, but. Either way, I mean, it's not great news for that whole sector of, low cost but reasonable performance, very lightweight, tablet-y type devices.
It's very hard to know how sales of those devices go. I mean, I don't see any great mover in that market. There's so many of those devices out there. I was in PC World yesterday on Tomical Road, and there are tons of those devices in there for, in that £100 to £300 range. But
that's laptops, though, isn't it? Not tablets.
Sorry.
Laptops, not tablets, right?
No, tablets.
Tablets, really? Windows 10 tablets?
Windows tablets, Asus and Packard, not Packard Bell, but the sort of the cheaper end of the market where those sort of tablets go. But I've never met someone with a Windows tablet. It's not, it's all iPads in the tablet market as far as I can see. I see very few people with Android tablets, apart from the Kindle devices. So I think, even if they do lose that market, they're not losing a great deal. But it does rather send Microsoft back into laptops and PCs, which, as we all know, is not exactly a thriving market right now. So it's hard to know if you're looking at Microsoft as you've got Microsoft shares and looking 5 years into the future, where does the growth come from? And the same question could be posed to Intel.
Yeah, but you could also pose that question 5 years ago, and now look at Microsoft in particular is posting incredible results.
But not from anything to do with Windows or to do with mobile. It's all services, isn't it?
There's a lot of it comes from services. A lot of growth comes from places like Azure. But the point is, it's still making a lot of money. So it can be very difficult, I think, sometimes to look from the outside, not having detailed knowledge of all the profit lines and all the margins to say, well, Microsoft is a certain word. You've got to keep a slightly more open mind, I think.
I'm not saying it's finished, but I think in terms of expanding out of its current markets, I think they're where do they go? The cloud services have only got so much room to grow. That's a hugely competitive market.
I'll tell you what, though, Barry. What do you think about things like the Surface Book? Is that the right move?
I've never been convinced by any of the Surface devices. I think I know I stand alone probably in the PC Pro office on that, but that whole form factor just leaves me cold. And the Surface Book is a laptop. It's not. It's just. Again, I've never seen one out in the wild, but I think the amount of people who want to detach a tablet from a laptop and use it that way, there's very few compelling reasons to do so, and not least because Windows 10 is not a great tablet OS.
You're not actually alone. I agree entirely, but I think the Surface. I mean, maybe it wasn't intended this way. I think the Surface actually has done a much better job as an ambassador for the idea of Windows 10 than as an actual device. I know a lot more people who've got into the idea of Windows 8 and Windows 10 and the whole detachable thing, and have kind of maybe had more time for the concept than have actually seriously considered really buying one themselves.
Mm.
On the question, Skeptical Crypto says, "You're right, Barry. I have a Windows 10 on a HP tablet, and it's a lonely experience."
How have you got questions? I can't see questions. God,
power. I've clicked the questions button. It's really high-tech stuff, Darren.
Oh, well, there they are.
Yeah, Q&A. Look at this. Oh, we can ask questions as well.
I think that's something for the readers or the listeners, should I say? I think.
Shall we go through them then? So, Skeptical Crypto asks, so where the bally heck have you been hiding then? And I think, where have you been hiding, Barry? Somewhere very far away from razors. I think we can safely say that.
Yes, largely in the glamorous surrounds of Burgess Hill, where you find me now.
Yes. Why is it so hard to find the A-list on alpha.com? Oh, actually, in answer to where's Darien been? Darien's.
Yeah, no, I think most people know. I've been on paternity leave. I've been on parental leave, and I've been saying it's sort of my fault that the podcast didn't come back when. Well, it's first of all my fault because I very selfishly took 6 months of leave, which is exceptional apparently, and I left you in the lurch a bit there for quite a while. Sorry, but then now I'm not based in the office anymore. I haven't come back into the office. I'm now working from home. Hence this lovely excursion into modern technology.
And your guitar collection. Okay.
That's not my entire guitar collection.
How many guitars have you got then?
7.
7. Okay, good. And a laser printer by the looks of things. Okay, so...
Do you want to describe everything in my study? I don't read around, but it's a
video thing, yeah, he's still figuring it out.
But, there's Barry with his, deserted backdrop. You with your glass of wine, Darren. So I just wonder if that was a glass of wine earlier. Okay, let's go to John Rogers' question. Why is it so hard to find the A-list on alpha.com? I always have to get there via a Google search. That's a slightly difficult question for us to answer because we're not. They're very much a sister brand to PC Pro now. But I know they have plans to do some dev work on the A-list and on the best buys. So I'm not sure it's going to help you too much, but basically keep an eye out on the site. I know they do have that as one of their hit list items. The other thing I should say is we're actually going to bring the A-list back up to 4 pages in the magazine as of the next issue, which is obviously exciting and breaking news. I expect to see that on BBC quite soon. So there you go. You can get some of that A-list hit there. Okay, let's move on to the next question, and this is over to you, Barry. Next story, I should say, because we've got BT. You're angry about BT, not for the first time.
Well, yeah, several million others, I think. So earlier this week, BT announced it was once again putting up its prices by anywhere between 5 and 7%. And the thing with BT, when it does these price rises, it doesn't just put up one price, it puts up the lot. So line rental is going up from $17.99 a month to $18.99. If you're on the BT Infinity broadband packages, they're going up by as much as £3 per month. There's an increase to call charges, and so the cumulative effect of all of these little increases is your bill goes up by quite a significant amount. So just to give you, and this is, by the way, the second time in the last year that BT have done this. They did a set of price rises last September, where again line rental went up, the broadband fees went up, the cost of BT Sport went up, which is done again. So the BT customers have been hit for the second time in 9 months. These new price changes will come into effect at the beginning of July. So when you look at, just at this time last year, you were paying $16.99 for line rental. That's now $18.99. Broadband. So I'm on the fastest Infinity broadband product. That was £26 this time last year. That will be just over £32 by the time these price rises take effect. The BT Sport, if you're still a BT Sport customer after they put up the price by £5 last September, it's now going up by another £1. So again, I wrote a piece for WebUser last year where saying how the introductory price, from the introductory price I came in for the first 3 months to where I was last September, the price had gone up by over 40%. Now that's going to push, this new set of price rises will push that over 50%. And I think people are getting a little bit sick of BT chipping away with these constant price rises, not least because this week they announced their profits had surged.
So call me naive. It does sound like this would be reason to go, well, screw you, BT. I'm going to go and go with some other provider. Presumably it's not that simple. How come?
Actually, it is, and fair play to Ofcom. A few years ago, they introduced a rule where if the providers implemented a price increase that was above the rate of inflation, you had the right to move within 30 days. And BT, the email that I got from BT this week makes that offer plain, that this increase is above inflation, and you now have 30 days to shift off without penalty if you choose to do so. The difficulty on that is that one of the things BT does is ask you to pay your year's line rental up front as a saver option. So you get it, I think you get it for like price of 11 months instead of 12 if you pay for the whole lot up front. And it's certainly not clear when I spoke to the BT reps earlier, because I'm definitely looking to now shift, if you get refunded that chunk of money that you've already paid it up front for the line rental. They didn't seem to have a very clear answer on that, and I'm hoping to get more clarity tomorrow when somebody's meant to be calling me back. But that could be one way of potentially locking in customers, it seems, because if you've already paid, as I have, until the end of August for line rental, then that's a chunk of money.
Well, even if you can get the outstanding amount back, I mean, it's just the more hoops you've got to jump through, the more the more likely it is you're just going to shrug your shoulders and say it's a pain, but I'm going to live with it. I get very annoyed with the way companies, they kind of do you right, they do the right thing, but they make it so that you have to do all the running. You've got to put in the effort, you've got to find the time. There's only so many hours in the day, there's only so much effort you can put into making sure you're getting a good deal on everything you're signed up for. So I do pull out of that.
No, that's the thing in this market in particular now, because everything is so connected, and if you're with Sky, for example, you could well have your television, your broadband, your telephone. Same with BT now. BT with their own television service. I'm not part of that, but broadband, telephone, and so you're not just changing one thing, you're changing 3 or 4, and that inertia to go, oh, this is going to be a huge hassle. I don't want to have to switch the telly off and go through booking engineers to come around and sort out the broadband and all that kind of stuff. That's what they rely on, and that's why you get these introductory price offers at £20 that look very tempting, and here we are, less than 15 months later, and it's likely to go up to over £36 alone, and that's excluding the line rental. That's excluding the BT Sport, which personally I cancel once the price hike started. But you can see how they get customers and trap them into this cycle.
So the current rate of inflation, we must be talking about 2%?
Yeah, about 2.5%, I think it is.
Okay, and so Jack Collins has written in to say, the latest offer to me from BT is for unlimited broadband for £25.50 per month. He's currently paying £20 for the same package. So
I think I'm getting trolled by BT, because this arrived in the post this morning, which is an invitation to take up BT Infinity for £10 a month. When they just put up my price to £33 a month, and then they're putting letters through my door saying, hey, come join BT for £23 less than we're currently charging you. Brilliant. Jack's my dad, by the way. Thanks, Dad.
Oh, is he? Oh, Dad. Okay. Darren, have you got any kind of anger to express on this topic?
Not exactly anger. I mean, I tend to think. I mean, that thing that Barry's father has commented on, actually, and Barry's kind of certificate that he was waving up, does make me think there is an element here of Hanlon's razor, where don't ascribe to malice that which can be adequately explained by incompetence, because it does seem, the way that they're interacting with customers doesn't actually seem particularly. It doesn't seem like a very cleverly put together Machiavellian scheme to make us, pay the most we can. It actually seems more like they're just kind of, one department is saying let's try hiking the rates, another department at the same time is saying let's try to, try to get more people signed up and give them special offers. It's not at all joined up. It's sort of, in a way, it's a little bit reassuring that they don't seem to have, got it down to a fine art of manipulating and kind of tricking us into giving the maximum money possible. In other words, it's just frustrating to deal with these companies.
They seem to have done it very well, actually. I mean, this is kind of a thing, you disguise it almost. If you say, right, putting up BT Sport by £1, or if you want HD, which we gave you free for 6 months, that'll be another sneaky £5 per month. Did we not mention that? So they are very. I think it is actually a strategy, and let's never forget BT is a company out to make money for its shareholders. So that is quite a big motivation for them. I wouldn't be at all surprised if there is a Machiavellian hand playing behind all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're crediting them with naivety they don't deserve. But if you look at the profits this week, revenue up 22%. From the same quarter last year, profits up 11%. I think they know precisely what they're doing, and I think that the argument that they made when they took over EE, that they're operating in a very competitive market and that keeps price competition down, well, they're just proving completely that that's not the case. This isn't a very competitive market. It's dominated by 2 or 3 big companies, of which BT is now by far the biggest. And
about the whole of the telecoms industry, just talking about.
Yeah, this is the thing, because the way Ofcom treated it when he was looking at those takeovers, they were treating broadband and telephone and mobile as separate markets. They're not. The big companies, the Sky, the Talk, the Virgins, the BTs, are big merged companies with all of these services: television, broadband, mobile, landlines, all covered. And there's only 3 or 4 big guys out there, and it puts a lot of pressure. It's a guarantee that as soon as the BT's line rental prices are announced the others follow suit within a month or two, and we'll see every other of those big providers creep their prices up this week.
Yeah, well, you see it in the utilities market as well, don't you? Everyone
Yeah.
follows suit. You see what it's like. We've seen it forever. For petrol prices. You know, you just need everyone just creeps them up, and they all do it at the same time to get the most profit. Again, it's just the open market, isn't it? What would Karl Marx say? What would Karl Marx say? Why are you shaking your head, Darren?
Darren's got a post on the back of the wall.
That's not Marx. I don't think Karl Marx really anticipated this particular situation, but I think the entire thing would be kind of off limits to Karl Marx. It's sort of say, you know, it's not really about having BT competing with Sky or Virgin or whatever. That's kind of.
Did he not talk about that in Das Kapital? Is that my mistake?
Not, he doesn't actually call out Virgin Media by name in Das Kapital. I'm not going to go that far.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to Bitcoin, Barry.
Yeah, so this is a curious story. Emerged over the weekend, I think, or early on Monday morning, when the BBC were trumpeting that they had a massive story that they were going to share with the world. And it appears a chap called Craig Wright, who's an Australian entrepreneur, came forward and basically claimed to be Satoshi Nakamoto, who is this much vaunted creator of Bitcoin. You may remember a couple of years ago, was it Newsweek, identified a poor Japanese fellow that they decided was Nakamoto, and this poor chap sort of got forced out of hiding and insisted that he wasn't. He was nothing to do with it. He just contributed to the project some years ago, but wasn't the founder. And I think that was pretty widely discredited at the time. This guy did seem reasonably convincing, and he certainly, I don't want to use the word took in, but the BBC, The Economist, and another publication whose name escapes me sort of clubbed together for this story, and he claimed to prove who he was by basically using the signature of Nakamoto that basically said it could only be him. And then pretty quickly it appeared that people with much greater technical knowledge than I, such as Dan Kaminsky, who's one of the big names in the security industry, just went, no, this isn't right. And so basically Dan Kaminsky and several others have claimed that that Craig Wright is basically using a section of a public key that was published with a transaction that was made by this Satoshi guy, and that it's not proof in the slightest that Craig Wright is who he claims he is. And now it seems to have gone into a bit of a deadlock, and Wright was due to provide some indisputable proof this week that he was Satoshi, but today he's published a blog post basically saying that he can't cope with this anymore. He thought he could do it, now he can't. He won't be providing the proof, and he's disappearing back off into the wilderness. So it's all very strange.
Yeah, it's a bit baffling because, I mean, one of the things, if this Craig Wright chap really were Satoshi Nakamoto, my first question would be, why the secrecy? Why the pseudonym? Why have you hidden in the shadows for so long? It seems like no one wanted to ask him that, or at least if they did, it didn't make the headlines. I haven't seen it. I've skimmed through the blog posts. I haven't seen an explanation for that. But also, it does now appear, that Craig Wright, he said that he would be able to, I believe it was transfer a Bitcoin which is known to belong to Satoshi, and that was how he was going to prove that it was him. And then he's like, oh, I can't do this. And a Bitcoin transaction, really, it takes a second. I suppose he was, I suppose we were invited to believe that it wasn't really the effort, it was more the affirmation, the proof that he was really Satoshi Nakamoto. But for some reason, that he having had this enormously high profile, his name is known around the world now. Now he said that he's now decided, oh well, actually, I don't want to be associated with this after all. And so it actually creates more questions than it raises more questions than it answers, because now I don't understand what he's supposed to get out of this either. The whole thing is just it's just baffling to me. And I seem to recall that the price of Bitcoin itself, actually the value of it on the exchanges, fell on this revelation, and I don't really understand that either. But I mean, that's the thing about Bitcoin. It's quite hard to understand. It's hard to understand how it works. It's hard to understand why people do the things they do about it.
Well, the big question for me is, why does it really matter who the real person, you said, I can't say the name, but, why does it matter that we know the identity of this person?
I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters to the currency that we know the identity of the person, but I believe it's. I mean, I don't think it's been proven, but you can very easily imagine that if you invented an e-currency, a cryptocurrency like this, at the very start, when they were worth nothing, when they were literally numbers that you could generate, when the difficulty was very, very low, so you could generate, 100 bitcoins in an afternoon, you'd do that. You'd definitely do that, and it's possible, therefore, that somebody out there is sitting on a stash of bitcoins which is worth, billions upon billions of pounds, and I guess there's a bit of an anxiety because the entire Bitcoin economy could be crashed overnight if he decided to, for example, give away all of those Bitcoins. And it could obviously, money trading, this is true of any currency, you can affect the value of the currency if you start dumping it, if you start saying, I will sell this, for half of what it's currently trading at. So the fact that there is, or the supposition that there is all that digital currency out there, we don't know where, we don't know who has it, we don't know what they want with it or what they're going to do with it. That does kind of, that means that Bitcoin is founded on an enormous uncertainty, but I'm not sure that really knowing the identity of the individual, just knowing the identity really helps. Well, it does, I suppose, allow you to start then understanding whether he's the sort of guy who's likely to dump the stock or whether he's likely to just sit on it forever. Or
okay, no, that's a very good answer. That's a far better answer than I thought I was going to get.
Well, I think the other point to make, as I think Dan Kaminsky made as well, was that that Nakamoto does have a vast quantity of Bitcoin in his name because he generated a lot of the early Bitcoin transactions. So there's no monetary motivation for this guy to come forward if he is genuine, and he's a rich man as it is. There is, there's very little for him to gain in terms of monetary gain, and so it's really hard to work out if this guy has completely made it up what his motivation was. And he said in his own interviews that he gave on Monday morning that he was given this one interview and then he was going to disappear. He wasn't in it for fame, he wasn't in it for money, he was just, he made it sound like he was on the verge of being exposed by some other reporters and decided to break the story himself rather than leave it to them. But what this guy's motivation is, if he's not genuine, is absolutely bewildering.
Surely if he was genuine, he'd have offered better proof by now. I don't really buy the argument he was giving that it's all become too much for him.
No, it's very strange. You must know you're about to bring this upon yourself.
Yeah, okay. All right, unless you guys have anything extra you wish to say about Bitcoin, let us move.
Can I have some, please?
Sorry?
Can I have some?
You have some. I'm not sure if anyone wants to give Barry bitcoins via the comments. Feel free.
I think I own about 1/100th of a bitcoin. I generated it on a little laptop back before the last difficulty leap. But I mean, I don't even know how I'd get at it now. It's in a wallet somewhere attached to I don't even know how many digits. What is it? It's like 32 hexadecimal digits or something, which I can't prove is me except by knowing the numbers and I think the password that I secured the wallet with, and it's just gone. I suspect a huge proportion of bitcoins are just lost forever in the system.
Bitcoin lost down the back of the sofa.
Yeah, that is a part of every currency, isn't it? Okay, let's talk about Apple, shall we? So it's had what's been declared by the media outlets as a terrible, terrible result because they made in the last quarter they only made $50 billion of revenue, which I think we can all agree is quite shocking, with a profit of $10 billion. So, calamity. However, there is a more worrying backdrop to this for Apple because there's two main things, really. There's the first, which is the sales of iPhones. So we all know that the iPhones are the most profitable part of Apple's business. And in fact, it could well be that iPhones, I heard it on More or Less last week, someone claimed that iPhones are actually the most profitable device ever. So apparently that will be debunked or not on More or Less tomorrow. but that's a massive hit to drop by 16%. At the same time, they've had a 26% decline in China, and that comes on the back of one of the billionaire investors, who kind of is a mover and shaker in the world of shares, this guy Carl Icahn. And he's basically sold all his Apple stock, and the reason he cited was that the Chinese market, he's worried about the Chinese market. And, you know, there are good reasons to be. I saw a light-hearted story on alpha.com, I think it was yesterday, explaining that China, they'd lost their battle to get the iPhone trademark in China to a handbag manufacturer. And so it's this kind of I don't know, country, I suppose, to operate in, this market to operate in, which is very tough for Apple, and in fact for everyone who's not a Chinese manufacturer, because it's a closed market and the government is so strong in there. So I can understand the concern. So it raises the question as well, and this is one I'll open up to you guys, whether or not, and it's almost become a hackneyed question already, but has Apple lost its spirit of actually making new things and innovating? Darien.
Yeah. Google just jumped to me because I could not resist just going at that point. I think Apple's really kind of exciting, groundbreaking innovations have slowed down. There's no doubt about that. But I think that might just be because all the markets it's in, all the markets it's known for, are very mature. And with the exception of the watch, where it's, they said they were taking their time to get it right, and those people who've got their watches, some of them absolutely love them. Not everyone, but I mean, it was for a first generation product. It was still very good, and it was still very, very transformative for Apple users. It just happened not to be first to market. So I think it's very easy to say, oh, Apple, can't innovate anymore. But actually, what more is there to do with a smartphone? What more is there to do with a laptop? And you hear all these rumors about Apple, like, definitely, so they say, going to make a car. And Tim Cook said something interesting last week he said, this week, in fact, he said that the next generation iPhones are going to be so great you'll wonder how you lived without them. I don't know what that is going to be. But, I think Apple still has that spirit of trying to go a bit further and trying to do more than just copy or just kind of iterate. It's just getting harder these days, and that's not Tim Cook's fault.
When you say that there are rumours they're going to go into the car market, there's also good evidence in terms of the people they're hiring.
Oh yeah, no, fair enough. When I say there's rumours, I mean Apple hasn't confirmed it, but Apple will not confirm anything until it does its big, huge, super amazing event. At which point, well, even then it will only confirm half the story. But yes, yeah, fair point. Yeah.
What about you, Barry? Are you an Apple cynic?
I sort of agree with Darien. I think that they've iterated the phone about as far as they can, to the point where they are going backwards to form factors and shapes that they had 3 or 4 years ago. It's difficult to see nobody's really innovating there. It's difficult to understand quite why Apple took such a hit in sales in that quarter. It's not like, I know Samsung claimed that the S7 range was selling very well, but it seems unlikely to me that it was such a big swing away from Apple that was the sole reason. So it's hard to imagine. I think, anecdotally, people hang on to their iPhones a lot longer than perhaps they used to. I know people who still have like iPhone 4s and 5s and are waiting for something to turn. And I don't think there's been a sort of compelling must-have iPhone for a long while. And myself, I moved off to Android a few years ago, and I've seen no reason to go back. The iPad market's static. They've got complete lock on the laptops, as they always have. So they are probably going to need a new product to push themselves back forward. I'm not sure the car's it. I don't think the world's ready for driverless cars. I just don't think the roads are in a situation where that's even going to be feasible for some time. So it's hard to know where they go. And I do have some sympathy for Tim Cook, because he's sort of coming at the end of this sort of period of great innovation. He's a bit like the guy who takes over from Alex Ferguson in some senses. It's like, where do you do it? Where do you go? Yeah, I think it's tricky for Apple. I think they're doing. It may just be that that's the life cycle of companies, in the same way we see in Microsoft. You reach maturity, you keep going with those product lines that have kept you in business for years. Now where do you go? And it may just be that is the sort of natural cycle of tech companies, and we're just waiting for the next one to come and boot Apple up the backside.
My understanding as well is that when people say it's a big revenue fall, that's a year-on-year thing, which is based on comparing it to Q1 2015, and that was when, stop me if I'm wrong, I think that's when the iPhone 6 was hitting, was really landing and gaining momentum, and there just hasn't been a big launch in this quarter which compares with that, so it's not really comparing to equivalent quarters. Like the year ago numbers we're comparing it to were unusual. I think Tim Cook said at the time, not every quarter can be like this one.
No, but I don't actually know exactly whether it was year-on-year or quarter-on-quarter, but I do know that every previous announcement has been, sales have been up. And we are talking about a significant chunk of phones that weren't selling. We're talking about 61 million fewer phones. That's a lot of warehouses. So it's not insignificant.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the reason
that's one phone for everyone in the UK.
Where's mine? But no, I mean, if it's to do with phones, I mean, the 6 I think was, I'm not going to say it was incredibly bold and visionary of Apple to come out with a larger phone, but it was always going to be a bit of an opinion divider versus what they've done in the past. And now they've corrected for that with the SE. I just think this is kind of a storm in a teacup over a company which is not uniquely a telephone company anyway. I mean, they make a lot of money from apps. They still make money from, sorry, I'm gesturing to a computer here that you can't see, from laptops. I don't know. I think every time any numbers come out, any revenue report, like there's this desire among the news media to spin it into the biggest story ever. And I think Apple is not currently the biggest story ever, either in its successes or in its, to the extent that it hasn't innovated lately.
Mm. Well, I do understand what you mean. There is definitely that push. Well, Barry is a long-term news journalist, so you know that pressure more than anybody else, Barry.
Yeah, it's one of those results that you're always looking out for. And the figures were pretty extraordinary, but I don't think it's a major problem for them right now. I think if the iPhone reaches the point where the iPad and before that the iPod does, where it's just quarter after quarter of decline, then Apple's got problems.
I do think actually for Steve Jobs' legacy, I mean, I'm definitely not going to say it's fortunate or good that he died when he did, but I think if he was still with us, he would be facing some of these same problems, and it might actually knock some of the shine off the reputation he has as this incredible visionary. As it is, Tim Cook is having to face the fact that, when Steve Jobs came on the scene, fair play, the iPhone was a really revolutionary device. I think we can fairly call it that. But of course, what we're up to now, 8th or 9th generation, wasn't going to repeat that success. There's only so many ways so many times you can reinvent the telephone, and it happens to fall to Tim Cook to keep on flogging that increasingly moribund horse rather than to Steve Jobs.
Yeah, it's very tough for him to be in charge of the biggest company in America by the world by a mile. I feel awful for the chap.
Are you being sarcastic? Because I don't envy him at all. The pressure must be unbelievable.
I think there are people in worse situations than Tim Cook. I think we can say that quite safely.
Well, yeah, we can all say that, but if that's the worst we can say, then he's doing all right.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, all right. Well, we are getting close to the end. So we've got a couple of comments that's come in. John Richardson has a very wise man saying, another loyal More or Less listener. What discernment? He's quite right. Do you guys listen to More or Less?
Oh, is that what that means? I could not make any sense of that. What's More or Less?
It's an excellent. It's a stats program basically. It explains the figures behind the headlines, and it
does sound like the sort of thing you'd listen to, Tim.
Well, it is the thing I listen to.
Is that a podcast?
Sorry?
Is that a podcast?
Well, it's on Radio 4, so there's two formats. This is turned into a more or less plug, but anyway, there's a World Service one, which is about 9 minutes long, which you can download as a podcast, or you can listen to Radio 4. It's every Friday, sometime in the afternoon, but I always just listen to it on demand anyway. But it's just coming to the end of the series, so you got one chance to listen to it tomorrow.
Okay, I'm dog walking a lot at the moment, so I'm collecting podcasts to listen to while I take a dog around the park for half an hour.
Well, I can also recommend, whilst we're on this theme, John Finnemore's Souvenir Program, which is just the most brilliant sketch comedy program in the world. Anyway, John Rudge has asked, you mentioned a 4-page A-list in the next magazine. Are there any other new features or planned changes in focus coming up? I wouldn't say there's anything radical actually coming up. I'm encouraging Darien to come up with more technical hands-on ideas.
Yeah. So I said to Tim, what exactly do you mean by a technical hands-on? And he sort of looked a bit sort of shuffled and looked over to the side and said, well, send me some ideas. So I sent him some ideas, and he said, yeah, they're not technical enough. So if anybody, guys, if you tell me what it is that you want to do that is difficult and technical, we can properly, roll up our sleeves and get stuck into the registry, do a bit of coding, write some PowerShell scripts. I'm all up for that. Just send in your ideas. Please let me know. And who knows? Maybe Tim will be happy with those, and we'll make them happen.
Yeah, well, if you want to email editor@pcpro.co.uk, I'll forward them on to Darien. So that's one thing, but we've also got some excellent features coming up. Go on, Barry, plug a feature.
Oh, blimey. The problem with features is they're done about 3 months in advance, so I've no idea where in the cycle we actually are.
Is this issue 261?
This is issue 261. It's just gone to subscribers, yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Okay, I'll have a quick look in the drive and see what I can find. This is proper live.
Kill email now. Do you want to explain briefly what that is, Barry?
Yeah, so we've been looking at services that sort of promise to kill your email, even if they don't do so entirely. So services like Slack, which you can see on Tim's screen right behind him there, which is basically how we operate PC Pro these days. There basically is no such thing as internal PC Pro email now. Everything goes through Slack, and it's very good for that. We've looked at Basecamp and Trello, 2 other products in that same kind of field that do similar kind of things. So it's a sort of deep dive into those services, what they do well, what they don't do very well, and they generally can. In the organisations I work in these days, Slack and Basecamp in particular have taken out a good chunk of 50-60% of my email volume, which I'm incredibly grateful for because my inbox was just ridiculous before that. So it's well worth a read if you're sick of turning up in the morning and finding you've got 50 unread messages. Both of those services are excellent at helping to cut out some of that unnecessary guff.
Okay, thanks, Barry. And so the other thing, I'll just open this out to any listeners or viewers. I've no idea with Google Hangouts whether the questions panel stays or whether or just disappears. So email me, editor@pcpro.uk, for any thoughts you have about this podcast, how you'd like it to develop, and what you want Barry to wear next week. Well, not necessarily next week, I should say, because frequency is one of those things that we need to talk about. But just any ideas you have about that, or indeed the magazine, I am all ears. With that, thank you very much, Barry and Darien, for taking part. Thank you very much to everyone who's asked us questions. And until our next podcast, even, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.